Hello everyone and welcome to Exam B. So in this video we are going to talk about deadlock in operating system, which is a very important topic for IBPS SO IT Officer. So from this particular video we are going to start delivering the content which is important for your exam, and we will take the important topics, we will discuss them, and we will solve one or two questions on that topic so that you can get a better understanding how this particular system is behaving, and how deadlock in operating system or any other topic which we will discuss will be asked in the exam. So let's start with the discussion of today's topic, that is deadlock. So in deadlock, first we have to understand what is a deadlock. So as the name suggests, this is something which will not allow the system to progress more. For understanding it, let's assume that there is one process P1 and there is one another process P2. There is one resource R1 and there is one resource called as R2. Okay, let's assume this is our current scenario where P1 and P2 are the process, R1 and R2 are the resources. So when a deadlock should happen, there are some conditions which need to be met in order to make the deadlock in the system. So first, what we have to get, some process should be assigned some resources. So let's say here P1 is having the control over R1. Like P1 is a process which is executing, and for execution it need R1. Similarly, R2 is it is taken by P2. Okay, so now what is happening? P1 is executing its at its own, taking R1. P2 is executing, taking R2. Now there will be a scenario when P1 will ask access of R2 and P2 will ask the access for R1, and these resources are occupied by P1 and P2 separately. For what is happening here, P1 is getting a hold on R1, okay, P2 is getting a hold on R2, but P1 is requesting to get R2 and P2 is requesting to get R1, but these resources are not free. So what will happen in this particular situation when P1 is holding R1 and requesting for R2 and P2 is holding R2 and requesting for R1? If a process holding a resource and requesting for another resource which is held by another process, then waiting will occur. What it has to do, it has to do waiting. Every process P1 here and P2 here has to wait because R1 and R2 are not free. So now when they are waiting for the resource held by the first process and the other process is waiting for the resource held by another process, this particular situation is called as deadlock, where either P1 and P2 cannot move further. So what is the definition at the end of the deadlock? So the definition will be like, if two or more processes waiting on some event which is likely to happen but it is not going to happen ever, then this particular condition will give us a deadlock. Okay, so this is the situation where we will have deadlock, and here in deadlock no one is going to proceed, so there will be no progress that will be made, and the system will be just waiting indefinitely. It will not get an event which will free it from deadlock. So here no progress will be made, and this particular condition is very critical, and we have to avoid this condition in our operating system and in other areas as well. Okay, so now this particular explanation, I think now you guys are clear what is a deadlock and when a deadlock is going to occur. Okay, let's talk about the next topic. The next topic is about the life cycle. How exactly we will know that, okay, the deadlock has happened or deadlock has not happened, how we are going to identify. So there is a life cycle, or you can say a set of process which will be there when a deadlock has to occur. So I will explain you, and there are 6 steps basically in this entire life cycle. So what will happen, I will explain you one by one. So the first step is like the process which are there in execution will request for the resources. So what will happen in the first step? Process will request for resource. Okay, as we saw in our previous example as well, that P1 was requesting for R2 and P2 was requesting for R1, where both R1 and R2 were held by P1 and P2 respectively. So this is the first step, that process will request for the resource. Now when they will the request, this request will go to the operating system. Okay, now in the second step, what it will do, operating system will validate the request of the process, will validate the request for the process. Okay, now once the operating system get the request, it validates the process. It has to identify whether the request is valid or it is invalid. Okay, so it has to identify between these two. So now if the request is valid, what it will do, it will check the availability of the resources. If operating system will find that the request is valid, it will check for availability of the resources, whether there is any resource or not. The request is valid, but are there any resources which are there to meet your demand or not? That will be taken care by the operating system. Now if the resources are free, there might be situation when resources are not free, there will be situation when resources are free. So let's say if resources are there and resources are free, so if resources are all or are free, then what it will do, it will allocate. Who will allocate? Operating system. It will allocate the resource to the process. Otherwise, if there is no resource which are free, if this is not going to happen, then what it will ask the process to wait. The process is going to wait because the resources are not free to meet the demand. Now in the fifth step, what is going to happen? If all the resources required by the processes are allocated, then it will go for execution. Now if the process, let's say it needs 3 resources, 1, 2 and 3, and all these 3 are being allocated to the process, then it will go for execution. If not, it will wait. If all the resources are available, it will go for execution. Otherwise, it will wait. Okay. Once the execution is completed, the processes are going to release the resources. So let's say the execution is going on. So once the process completes its execution, then it will free all the resources which it has taken till now for the execution. It will free all resources which were occupied, which were taken by it. Okay, so this is the thing which happens with the life cycle. I will again repeat it in a very fast manner. Processes first will request for a resource to the operating system. Operating system is going to validate the request, whether it is valid or invalid. If the request is valid, then it will check for the availability of the resources. If the resources are available, then it will be allocated to the process. If the resources are not available, the process has to wait till the resources are available. Then if processes require n number of let's say resources, and all those resources are available, then the process will go for execution. Otherwise, it will keep on the waiting state. Now when the process execution is done, all the resources are free which were occupied by the process. So this is the manner how the process and the resources are related to each other, defining the life cycle. So here, in which step the deadlock is going to happen? The deadlock is going to happen in the step number 4 and 5, where there is a waiting state. And if this waiting state is in that area where nobody can proceed further, this will be accountable to the deadlock. Now let's take one example. This particular question will actually give you an idea how we have to understand the deadlocks. Okay, so this particular question is saying to consider a system where there are n process and there are 6 tape drivers. So these 6 tape drivers are resources and there are n process. Okay, if each process require 2 tape drivers, so every process will be in a need of a 2 tape driver to complete their execution. So what is the maximum value of n which will ensure that the deadlock free execution is going to happen? So what we have here is like, let's begin with the solution. We have here n processes. There are n processes and we have to find the value of n so that the deadlock free execution can happen. And how many resources we have? So we have how many resources? So resources are 6. 6 tape drivers are there. Now we have to make sure that the deadlock execution is free, and every process will require how much or how many number of tape drivers. So every process will require 2 tape drivers. Okay. Every process is going to require 2 tape drivers for the execution. So if 2 tape drivers are given for a process, that particular process will go on execution, will finish the execution, and then what it will do, it will return or it will free those existing tape drivers which it has taken for the execution. Now let's assume we have n equal to 5. Let's say we have 5 processes. Let's say P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5. This is an analytical question, by the way. So there are these many processes. Now let's give one tape driver to every particular process. Let's say there are 6, no? So let's give one tape driver to every process for the execution. Okay, now there is one tape driver T6 which is free, because how many we have total? We have 6. So now P1 and P5 all have one tape driver, and every particular process need 2 tape driver. So if I will give this particular first process the T6 driver, T6, if I'll assign it to this, what it will do, it will go for execution because the need is only 2. So it will start executing and it will free T1 and T6. Now these T1 and T6 can be utilized by P2 or by P3 or by P4 or P5. Any 4 can have access to it. Let's say P2 and P3 got these 2. So now P2 and P3 will go on executing and they will free T1, T2, T3, T6. Okay, these 4 will now be free. Now these can be taken care by P4 and P5 for the execution. So what should be the answer here? Answer will be 5. If we have 5 processes overall, then there won't be any kind of deadlock. If I'll increase any extra process, let's say P6, then P6 will have access to T6, and now every particular resource is being taken by one process and they're waiting for another resource, so it will be a deadlock situation. So we cannot have any extra process. So the answer here will be 5. Okay. So this is the way how you have to analyze the questions. These kinds of questions can come in a form of MCQ questions for your mains examination in IBPS SO. So what I'll do, suggest here, please do read the 3 concepts that I have told you. Understand these concepts fully and try to attempt these kinds of questions and can get better understanding of deadlock. In the upcoming videos, we are going to discuss about the deadlock characterization, the banker's algorithm, and many more things to make this topic complete. Okay, by the time, keep practicing and stay updated. And if you like this video, you got the knowledge from this video, do like the video and subscribe the channel to get the regular update on IBPS SO IT examinations. So that was all from my side. Thank you, everyone.